It's now in early summer that one of the most beautiful medicinal herbs is blooming, chamomile. And this is German chamomile. Grows up quite a bit taller than Roman, sometimes or oftentimes needs a little bit of support, but is otherwise pretty easy to grow. And once you harvest the flowers, you can dry them out or use them fresh in herbal teas, really calming and delicious teas. But they're also a great skincare herb in that they're really calming and soothing to the skin, really great for eczema and inflamed skin conditions. And today I'm going to show you how to use them to make handmade soap. This is cold processed soap from scratch, all natural, it's vegan as well, and we're going to be using chamomile to make an infusion to mix throughout the bars. We're also going to be using chamomile essential oil, and we're going to be drying out the flowers as well so that we can use them as a decoration. Now, before we make this beautiful chamomile soap recipe, I want to let you know that I have a brand new online soap making course available for you to enroll in. It is called Natural Soap Making for Beginners, and in it I introduce you to the ingredients, the equipment, safety, setting up your soap making station, and step-by-step soap making videos. There's also plenty of printables in there, and the course guides you through using various different ingredients so that by the end you will have successfully made quite a few batches of soap, but also have the confidence to go on and make many more different types of recipes using flowers, herbs, other natural ingredients that you might come across. If you'd like to learn a little bit more, there's details down in the video description and also a link to where you can go over to learn more about the course and to enroll. So that's right down there. Now let's get to making chamomile soap. This is a small 1 pound or 454 gram batch of cold processed chamomile soap. It's all natural, palm oil free, and vegan. And the batch creates 5 to 6 bars of gentle and sweetly scented soap. Chamomile smells a little bit like apples, and it's also a soothing skin herb, so it's great in natural skincare recipes and handmade soap. The first step in making chamomile soap is getting all of your ingredients together, organizing them and measuring them out, and that includes the chamomile. And you'll need some dried chamomile for this recipe to decorate, and you can use fresh or dried chamomile to make the infusion for the lye solution. Now, you can purchase dried chamomile, and that's perfectly fine to use in this recipe, but if you grow your own, the quality will be much better, the scent will be much more intense, and when you dry it, it will actually look like dried chamomile. And more often than not, when you purchase dried chamomile, it turns up brown and a little bit discolored and doesn't look like this. You can still use it though, it's perfectly fine. Now, to harvest chamomile, you'll want to harvest the flowers when they are fully open. So late morning, early afternoon is best. Pluck them and then get them drying as soon as you can. And if you would like to use a food dehydrator like I do, then you'll want to set it on a pretty low setting, 30 to 40 Celsius, and dry it for a couple of hours or until the chamomile flowers are bone dry. These are the ingredients that you'll need to make homemade chamomile soap using the Lovely Greens recipe. And you can find a full printable recipe on the website. That's lovelygreens.com, and I'll put a link to it down in the video description. Now, chamomile and chamomile flowers are the first ingredient that we need to talk about. This is chamomile that I grew, harvested, and dried last year. And a lot of purchased chamomile will look similar to this, or even a little bit darker and a little bit less flower-like. Some of it just looks like chaff. So be aware of that when you are purchasing dried chamomile. In contrast to that, this is chamomile that I picked earlier and dried in the food dehydrator, and it finished just about an hour ago. It's now room temperature, and this is going to be great for decorating the tops of the soap. If you are working with dried chamomile that looks like this, then maybe think twice about using it to decorate the tops of the soap, and maybe just leave that with an embellishment of texture rather than adding a bit of dried flower material on top. Now I'm using this to make the herbal or the chamomile infusion for the lye solution, and there is 2 tablespoons of dried chamomile in here, and it's going to be perfectly fine. If you wanted to use fresh, you would double the amount, so 4 tablespoons. This is the water that we're using to make that infusion. It's distilled water, and we'll come back to that in the first step. Over here, this is sodium hydroxide. This is the lye that we're using to make soap. This is not an optional ingredient. This is the magic ingredient that helps you to make cold processed soap. In the little bottle here, this is chamomile, Roman chamomile essential oil. This is quite an expensive ingredient, but it gives that really beautiful appley chamomile scent to your bars. Now in the pan, we've got 3 different solid oils. There's coconut oil, there's shea butter, and there's cocoa butter. And then over here in this jug, there's olive oil and castor oil. All right, are you ready to start making soap? The first step is making the chamomile infusion. And so I have the dried chamomile here. Again, you could use fresh, just double the amount. And then I also have some distilled water. And we use distilled water in soap making and in making skincare because it doesn't have any contaminants or dust or bacteria in it that could affect the shelf life of the end products. Now, to make the infusion, we're going to have to heat the water, and you can do this in the microwave, you can do it in an electric kettle, or you could do it on a hob, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pour it into a pan and heat it until it is just starting to steam. I think that's hot enough. We don't want it to boil, we just want it hot enough to be able to infuse into the flowers. So let's turn this off. We'll put this hob back here and put the jug that the water was in originally here. And all we're going to do is put the chamomile flowers in and pour that hot distilled water over the top. And all we need to do now is allow this to cool to room temperature. I've left the chamomile infusion just out on the side and it's cooled down, and now it's time to strain it. You can use a little sieve like this, or I'm going to use this larger one. And this is really just to remove all of the little bits of chamomile from that liquid. This is optional, but if you do put the chamomile bits into your soap, they can be a little bit scratchy and they will certainly turn brown over time. So let's strain them out so that we have a nice, lovely, even yellow color to our soap. This is a new jug, and I'm just going to pour the chamomile infusion through. I'm gently just squeezing the chamomile here because it does absorb quite a bit of water, which is why there's a lot more water used to make the infusion than is what actually is needed for the soap recipe, for the lye solution. So now that I would say most of that water is out, let's set this aside. And what we have left is a chamomile infusion with very few little flecks of chamomile. It's not a big deal if there's a few in there. If you want to be meticulous with removing all of them, you'll want to use a cheesecloth rather than a sieve. But this is guaranteed to be a little bit more than what we need for the soap recipe. So let's get a kitchen scale out and a new jug. And we need to measure out 124 grams of this infusion. I have a couple of ingredients here. This is the lye, the sodium hydroxide, and the chamomile infusion that we've just made, measured out, and gotten ready for this step. And I've also got a silicone spatula here in my hand and a basin that I've just shallowly filled with water. You could use your kitchen sink as well. And all I'm going to do is pour the lye into the chamomile infusion. You can see it's changing color already. And get every little bit out and make sure that you get your spatula in there and give it a good stir right off the bat. It's turning into that lovely yellow color, and that color will transform our soap from kind of a off-white color to a lovely pale yellow color. And I can see there's a little bit of lye left in there, so let's stir that out and get it into the jug as well. This lye solution is really hot right now, which is why we're going to carefully put it into a basin just so that cold water can help to cool it down. While the lye solution is cooling down, we need to melt the solid oils. Now you can see that the coconut oil has already started melting. It is just so warm today, but the shea butter here has not been affected and the cocoa butter is still as hard as anything. So we need to melt all of these together and get them down to just melted, no more. We don't want it to be sizzling hot. We just want these to be melted and for the oils to be transparent. I have the heat on just 2, so it's very low. And what I'm doing with the spatula is I'm moving the oils around and trying to break them up when it's possible to do so, because that increases the surface area and helps to speed up how quickly these melt down. It only took a couple of minutes for the oils to fully melt. And I've just set them here on a pot holder and we're going to add the liquid oils to the pan. This is olive oil and castor oil together in a jug, and I'm just giving it a good stir because the castor oil is very thick and without stirring it will stick to the bottom of the jug. So let's pour this in. Try to pour it in against the spatula. It helps to reduce air bubbles from forming in your soap. And give this a good scrape out. Try to get every last drop. With all the oils in the pan, let's take the temperature. 176, it's very hot. We need to cool this down. We're trying to get it down to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 38 degrees Celsius. 99 degrees Fahrenheit and 99 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty close. The next step is getting the lye solution into the pan of oils. And I also have my mold ready. I have it over here sitting on some cardboard. And I also have my immersion blender ready to go as well. And then lastly, the last ingredient is sitting out here too. I've got the chamomile essential oil and it's ready and waiting. What I'm going to do is I've got the spatula here in the oils and I'm going to pour the lye solution through the sieve and against that spatula. And what we have here in the pan is all of the oils and the lye. And we're going to need to bring this to an emulsion and trace, which is a thickening of the ingredients. With one of these, it speeds up the process of getting soap to trace by quite a bit, but you do need to use it in a very precise way. When you put it into a shallow pan of oils, these small soap recipes, make sure that you do it at an angle, and then that way you can reduce the amount of air inside the head of the immersion blender. Once it's inside, give it a little bit of a tap on the bottom. That helps to reduce even more air. And then the technique that you use is stir with it while the immersion blender is off. And then you can pulse with it as long as it's stationary and pressed to the bottom of the pan. So here we go. Are you ready to see this all come together? So I do a few pulses and then stir it all together until it's all an even color. And then I'll repeat this. And I'll keep repeating this until the soap thickens up just slightly, and I'll show you what that looks like. That is a really light trace that we have here. Trace is usually when you can see a little drizzle just on the surface of the soap batter. Just enough to leave a little bit of a texture before going back down. And this is the perfect point to stop mixing. And now I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of chamomile essential oil. And with this particular essential oil, you don't need much. Other soap recipes and many of mine have about 3 teaspoons, and sometimes more for this size batch of soap. You might also be able to see that the soap is thickening up even more, but just make sure that you stir in all of that essential oil and that you don't see any streaks in the soap batter before we go to the next step. I have the mold sitting on cardboard just so that I can move it around a little bit easier. It also helps with cleanup. And now we're just going to get this soap batter in the mold. Get every last drop out of here. And work as quickly as you can because the soap will continue to thicken up. I've got most of the soap in the mold, and now what I'm going to do is just settle it. So I've lifted this up a little bit, and I'm just going to drop it just a couple of times. And that helps to get the soap to go into the corners and get it a little bit smoother. The surface, because it is a medium trace, it's quite a rustic look there. You could smooth it, you could work with it. You could also add a little bit more texture if you would like, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to create just a little bit of extra texture on one side only. And next, we're gonna decorate just on one side with chamomile flowers. And I've taken my glove off just for convenience here, but I'm going to be sure not to touch the soap. So I'm just gonna drop the chamomile flowers on top. And you'll notice that I left little spaces in between each little group of chamomile flowers. And that's because it'll be much easier to cut this into bars if I leave a little bit of a gap. Next, what I'm doing is I'm walking the soap very carefully over to the oven, which I've preheated to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, about 77 degrees Celsius. And I'm just going to put the soap in the oven, turn it off, close it up, and leave it here overnight. It's the next morning, and so I'm going into the oven. It's completely cool. The soap is completely cool, and it has completely gelled. So it's a little bit darker in color than what it would be if you left it just out on the counter. And all I'm doing is I'm putting it on the counter now so that I can use the oven again, and I'm going to leave the soap here for another day before I cut it up. 2 days after making cold processed soap, most of the saponification is complete, and it's relatively safe to handle the soap. But I'm still wearing gloves because I don't want fingerprints on it, and I just want to keep my skin safe. Here it comes. It's just sliding out now. Once that suction is released from the bottom, then it's relatively easy to get it out. You just have to keep pushing and pushing. And then when you get it out of the mold, you'll have a perfectly square block of chamomile soap. And this can be 5 bars, which is what I'm going to cut it into, 6 or even more, depending on how wide you want your bars. When it comes to cutting this block of soap into bars, you can use just an ordinary kitchen knife and cutting board and cut them kind of freestyle, or you can measure it out with a ruler and then cut precisely, or you can get a professional soap cutter. I can put my loaf in, lift up that guillotine, and then slice it pretty easily. There we go. Pull this back. And what we have is the first bar of chamomile soap. I've cut that block of soap into 5 beautiful bars that each have the chamomile decoration on the top. You can see that rustic swirling as well, and just absolutely beautiful. I love simple soaps like this. And I have them all arranged on that same piece of cardboard because now I'm going to use it as a tray to take these into the other room to put onto my drying rack or my curing rack. And I'm going to leave the soaps there for a month to dry out, to finish saponification, and to allow the final crystalline structure to form before actually using them. And you can do this in your own home on a bookshelf or someplace that's out of the way. Just make sure that it's dim, there's plenty of airflow, and that the soaps won't be disturbed. Leave them there, they'll scent the room while they're curing, and then at the end of the month you can start using them. Chamomile is so fun to work with. It's easy to grow, it's fun to harvest, and it has so many benefits. It's also pretty safe to use as well. We can have it in medicinal teas, so soothing infusions that you can make at home, and it's also great in soothing skincare. And as we've just seen, it's not that difficult to use it to make homemade chamomile soap. But if you would like a more broad introduction to making handmade soap, I do encourage you to check out my new Natural Soap Making for Beginners course. And there's information down in the video description. And again, that goes through 16 videos, and it takes you on the journey of making different soap recipes step by step. And there's also support in there. So if you have any comments or questions, or you need some extra support, I'm there to help. Now, if you want to have another skincare recipe that uses chamomile, so say you've got loads of chamomile to use, I have another video that you can watch next, and that shows you how to use chamomile to make a really beautiful and soothing skin cream. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now.